Great. Thank you, Patsy and Carla, for assisting me today. Good morning, everybody. Welcome to my session, Managing Uncertainty, How to Use Social Emotional Learning Strategies to Help Adult Students. My name is Wendy Sweeney, and I am the manager for PANDA. We provide disability assistance for adult basic education across the state of Minnesota. I'm also a licensed psychologist, and I welcome you today. So I just want to start out the session by mentioning our fabulous website. As you might notice, we got a new logo and we changed our tagline to physical and non-apparent disability assistance to coordinate with our acronym. So I still has all the same great information in our website. If you have not visited our website in the past, I would highly encourage you to do so. There are all kinds of, there's all kinds of categories of various disabilities within our website, and instructional strategies and community resources. So if you have any more questions about mental health, I encourage you to visit that category. So let's talk about what we will be discussing today by the end of the session. We've got an hour today. I'm initially going to be talking about the uncertainties in our world and how it has impacted our thoughts, emotions, learning, and teaching. Then I'm going to be talking about some methods to manage that uncertainty. What can we do about it? And after that, we're going to segue into what social emotional learning is and how it can be beneficial to our adult education students. And I'm going to be sharing some very practical social emotional learning instructional ideas to use in class to improve student learning. And at the end, you're going to be coming up with a plan to actually implement these ideas into your classroom. So let's start out and talk about uncertainty. I'm calling it the good, the bad, and the ugly. We certainly have had a ridiculous amount of uncertainty in our world in the last 18 months or so. And I want to share a definition of uncertainty to start us out. Definition is the feeling of not being sure what will happen in the future. Boy, isn't that the truth? And so I'm going to launch into each one of these now. Let's start with the good. It's an opportunity for growth, correct? I mean, all of the changes that we have been through with COVID and social unrest and political uncertainties and you name it, all the changes in your instructional models, all those kinds of things. So I would like to start out by asking you to share in the chat box something you have learned from living with uncertainty and change. And for me, I will start, one thing that I have really learned is how to become more flexible. That's something that I have really grown and learned from during the COVID pandemic. So let's take a minute for you to share your ideas, and Patsy's going to read the chat box for me.
Yeah, so we've had similar ideas: go with the flow, to be more open-minded, not to force it, to let go of control, flexibility and adaptability. A more concrete one, a lot of new technology. Definitely things like living one day at a time. And forgive me if I'm not reading yours, they're coming in rather fast. So the fact that we're all interrelated, how to connect with students virtually and getting more comfortable with that, being more patient, focusing on what's important, being attentive to your own and others' emotional well-being. Someone has learned that they don't like it. Everyone is in this together, learning together. You're not alone.
Fabulous.
Yeah, lots of great stuff. Offering more grace to others and being able to adapt.
Thank you, everybody. Really so I'm hearing a lot of opportunities for growth that are going on. Certainly, you have all had to be forced to make some changes even when you don't want to, which is understandable. So I do want to add to the good is to let you know how much I appreciate everything that you have done. This has just been one change after another, often unexpected, clearly back in March 2020 when we had to shelter in place and everybody had to transition to teaching online. And whether you were comfortable with it or not, you were forced to learn all these things, me included. And I have become a little more aware of technology than I was in the past. I guess that's one more thing that I can say I've grown with, but I do want to thank you and tell you how much I appreciate all that you're doing and continue to do. So let's talk about the bad and the ugly piece of this uncertainty. And that really involves some lack of resolution that just doesn't feel right. It's so challenging, any change, but when you don't get that resolution, it can be even more challenging. And so I'm just going to highlight 3 different areas around the bad and the ugly, starting with compassion fatigue. And what I mean by that is that feeling of burnout that many of you may be feeling from being emotionally overloaded by helping students. You're in the helping profession, and it can be quite daunting. And having to do, I'm sure I've heard various instructional models going on there right now out in the field, where whether they're in person or continuing to be online or some combination of a hybrid or high flex, all these different things. I want to share with you several studies have been done, and they say that teaching is one of the most stressful jobs. Surprise, surprise. Wow. So knowing that this is one of the most stressful jobs, and this was prior to the pandemic, and so adding that onto it, boy, you have been through a lot. So I want to thank you again. But that compassion fatigue can really cause exhaustion and can impact your satisfaction. A lot of teachers retired in this past year that weren't planning to. So it's a real fact that it's out there. So it's important to nurture yourself, to give yourself some grace, to set some boundaries, those kinds of things. Secondly, let's talk about COVID. Are we not burned out on COVID? Just all of the changes that we've been through since March 2020, how things continue to change. Like Tammy so well said, that just every time they just made decisions, school decisions and restaurants and government, like, what are we going to do? Do we mask? Do we not mask? Do we shelter in place? Can we be together? Can we not be together? All these things, it's so much of it's out of our control, but the longer it goes on, the more difficult it is to tolerate. And I think I'm seeing that. I'm really observing a lot of people just saying, I don't care anymore, or going the opposite of, I'm not being by anybody. Like, it's very hard to know where you might lie in that sphere of COVID burnout. But I think it's just so much of it is out of our control, and we have to accept that this is ongoing, and we may not be going back to normal, that this is our new normal. But we are all in this together, and we will continue to push forward. Things have improved in a lot of different ways. And so keeping that in mind, putting it in perspective is so important in this situation. Lastly, I want to talk about differences of opinion. And boy, are those so true. It's just, there's so much information in our world right now. I think back when I was younger, this is going to show my age for sure, but when we had just 5 channels you could choose from, and usually it was really boring, so you didn't even watch TV. Now we have 800 channels, And then we have social media, and we have ability to talk to people by text or Twitter, all these different things. So in other words, we're just really getting flooded with all of this information, and it's very hard to decipher where the truth lies. And I think that has caused more division in our country and in opinions specifically, which can be very challenging. And what I have just noticed is that people are either acting in by just kind of suppressing and kind of removing themselves, maybe drinking a little more than they should or eating more than they should. Or there's the acting out where people are just very emotionally showing their emotions, either with, you hear about road rage incidences and people getting angry on airplanes, airlines having to land because of people acting out and really staying in their extreme points of view. So just this emotion that has really driven us to very big extremes rather than listening to each other and paying attention to what those differences might include. So let's talk about how do we go about managing all of this. It's a lot, right? So I want to start with a video. This is a very short video. We tried it out and it worked. I'm usually a little apprehensive to show videos, but this is one way that you can manage uncertainty.
All right, as much of the world continues on in isolation, people working from home, they're trying to figure out things to do with their family, things to figure out how to pass the time. Yeah. Lindsay and Kels, a lot of teachers have been going online and coaches trying to help out their students and their athletes. This one teacher in particular, music teacher, I thought was phenomenal. Not only did she pick up an instrument and decide to help out her student and spread some joy, but she wrote a song, and as inspiration, she was going to share what she's been going through and how it makes her feel while she's in isolation. Have a look.
Hey, so as some of you guys might know, I'm a music teacher, and I found that one of the best ways that I can process the whole transition to online learning and teaching is to write a song. So I wrote a song. I'd like to share that with you guys now. Here we go.
Well, I hope you got a kick out of that. I thought that was so funny. Every time I see it, I laugh. And just a little humor here to lighten the mood. But it is one way you can manage uncertainty, is just scream about it, right? As this gal certainly did. But let's talk about other ways you can manage it. Number one is identifying your uncertainty triggers. And what I mean by that is there's certain things that can set us off emotionally that they may be unconscious or they may be conscious, but something that what are the things that just really get under your skin? For instance, reading some negative news or seeing somebody who's not masked or reading a social media post that's trips your trigger. There can be all different sorts of things, and everyone is different, but identifying and kind of being more aware of what those triggers are so that you can kind of step back and take a deep breath before reacting. Secondly is challenging some of your internal dialogue. And this is something we all have conversations in our head constantly. And sometimes those thoughts can turn negative and impact our mood and how we feel about things. I'm going to be talking in much more depth about this in my next session about how you can go about doing that. Thirdly, just being more tolerant. It's easier said than done, correct? But really making more of an effort to be tolerant of these differing opinions, trying to forgive them, trying to listen to them. We really do need to be more willing to hear from other people and listen to our friends and not buy into these extreme, cable news. They call themselves news. That always bothers me. It's really opinion shows. But just, talking to people is what I'm trying to say here that I think is more important. Letting go of those things out of your control. So much of what's going on in our world is out of our control. And I always try to envision putting the things that are out of my control into a Teflon pan, and how everything slides right off a Teflon pan and you're just throwing it into the garbage disposal, just like letting it slip off, and letting it go as much as you can. And then on the other hand, really taking action on those things that you can control, really kind of distinguishing between that is so important right now. And then just keeping a daily routine. I know this is something I harp on all the time, but I think it's so important when there's change in the air and uncertainties all around us. Routines really ground us and really help us to feel like we can function much better in our world. And so I mean this both in the classroom, keeping daily routine in your class, but also in your personal life, trying to keep that routine of getting up at the same time and doing what you normally would do, but trying to keep that daily routine just can really be calming. And then finding some way to release tension. And for everybody, that's a little bit different, but that tension that we're carting around really unconsciously is not good for us, obviously. And so finding some way that you can release that tension, whether it's, I think sometimes people think, oh, I have to have 30 minutes of exercise, and then you never can find that 30 minutes. That's me for sure. So try, but remembering it doesn't have to be 30 minutes. It can just be a few minutes, whether you just run up and down the stairs or you do 5 jumping jacks before you go to bed, but just some way of releasing that tension, both physically and mentally, releasing on paper your feelings at the same time. These are ways that you can release the tension. Adapt, adapt, adapt. You all, I don't even have to say this. This is like preaching to the choir, but I like to kind of use visuals of thinking of like a pipe cleaner and how a pipe cleaner can bend and twist and change, and kind of using that as a visual as you're thinking about adapting. So now we are going to get into a breakout session. I want you to get together in your groups. Patsy had, hopefully all of you were able to print up the handout that Patsy shared the link in the chat box at the beginning of the session. So if you haven't done that yet, if you can access that handout and print it up or access it on your computer, it's just kind of a way for you to follow along, and then also to write down information when we do the breakouts. So these are the 3 things I would like you to talk about with your group. And first off is like, what are your triggers? I talked about triggers, trying to identify what those might be. Even if you can identify one, that would be great. And then secondly, talk with each other about what are the things you're worrying about. Are you worrying about work? Are you worrying about something personally? What are the things that are on your mind that just kind of add to this uncertainty? And then lastly, coming up with 3 action items. What are 3 things you can do about some of these things and managing that uncertainty? So Patsy's going to put you into some breakouts. We're going to take 8 minutes and then come back and share.
Right. So I put a link to the PDF of the handout in the chat box, as well as a forced copy one. If you want to be able to just type onto one, you can use that second link. And then I've put the 3 questions on the screen also in the chat box. So those will follow you into your breakout. I'll open those rooms. If you joined us after I set up the rooms, you won't go into a breakout right away. Just give us a second and we'll assign you. All right, we'll see you back in just a few moments.
See you back in a few minutes.
So Paula and Anna, I see you're still with us. If you've stepped away, we totally get it. But if you're having trouble finding your way to the breakout, let me know.
Patsy, should I go ahead and pause the recording?
Yes, please. Thank you. I do need you to unmute though, Wendy.
Sorry about that. So I was in one of the breakouts and I feel like it wasn't enough time. I'm not sure how much the rest of you were able to get through all the 3 different areas, but I hope you had some good discussion at least. It was a chance to share some of your frustrations and some of the things that are triggering you. So is anybody willing to share a trigger that was discussed in your group? You can just put it in the chat box.
So Wendy, I'm seeing technology glitches or a trigger.
Yes.
COVID, for sure. That's it for the moment.
Okay.
Oh,
And-
internal and external expectations and too much digital literacy stuff and politics.
Okay. Okay, good. I think those were a lot of similar in our group as well. Anyone want to share a worry that they have?
So this could be a trigger or a worry. Imagine, I'm not sure when it came in, false information or no information being shared, ever-changing classes from online to in-person.
Okay, and lastly, is anybody willing to share one thing they can do? An action item, something you can have control over, that you can do.
While those are being put in, we did have another worry around knowing that the staff is exhausted and your colleagues are exhausted.
Oh, yes.
Yeah, as far as action items, exit conversations, getting the booster shots, going on walks during breaks, being able to agree to disagree, voicing concerns and advocating for answers.
Great. Okay, thank you everybody for sharing. Let's move forward. So now I want to talk about how uncertainty impacts learning and teaching, but how does that impact our students? First thing is that our brain is a predictive organ. Imagine that. We really crave safety and security and that sense of control. Our brains really do need that to operate at their peak performance. And if that brain is on constant alert, it's difficult to learn, and that increases emotions and anxiety. So being aware that if your students are on constant alert for all these changes and have a lot on their mind, it does increase their emotions and anxiety, and then that takes away their attention, and if they can't attend, they can't memorize or recall things. So both attention and memory are impacted. So kind of going back to that need for a safe and predictable classroom to build that trust and reduce the anxiety. There was a study that was done that the best, most safe environment is high structure along with high warmth. So keep that in mind. So I really want to suggest starting your class with some kind of a calming activity to help with regulating emotions. That's a really something that I'm going to be getting into a few other ideas around that as we talk about social emotional learning. But thinking about now at the beginning of the year, if you can get into a routine of some kind of calming activity, whether that's a deep breathing exercise or a short yoga activity or meditation or playing some calming music. And we'll talk more about some of these ideas, like I said. Taking breaks is always important, obviously, as a way to just refocus and rejuvenate during the day, whether you're doing it online or in person. And then lastly, using those social emotional learning strategies, which I'm going to talk about now. So what is social emotional learning? You may have heard about this, but maybe you don't know that much about it. And I'm going to talk about some of the benefits associated with social emotional learning. And what it is the ability to manage and express social and emotional aspects of one's life. And that's so important right now as we're talking about uncertainty and the emotions that it raises. Social emotional learning supports equitable learning environments and has been shown to improve learning. And thirdly, managing emotions in social relationships is key for success in the workplace. So this all kind of buys into the CCRS and all that you do in your teaching. And for those with disabilities and mental health and learning challenges, SEL improves relationships and social skills. So there's a lot of benefits to this social emotional learning. So you may, I mean, I've been hearing this term floating around for a while, so I became very interested in it. And actually, it's been around since 1994. If you can imagine. And it came out of the Collaborative for Academic and Social Emotional Learning, also called CASEL for short. And if you want to learn more about social emotional learning, I would highly recommend you visit this website. It's got gobs of information and it has this graphic that I'm showing here on the left that they use that kind of shows the benefits of the waves of once you learn it in classrooms, it can obviously impact school environment, families and communities. And so out of this Collaborative for Academic Social Emotional Learning, the purpose of it was to establish evidence-based social emotional learning strategies for the K-12 schools. And obviously this does also benefit our adult learners. And so there's 5 components to their framework: self-awareness, self-management, social awareness, relationship skills, and responsible decision-making. So I'm going to be touching on each one of these and giving you some ideas of, well, what does this mean? How can I implement these ideas into my classroom? So the first one we're going to talk about is self-awareness, which is understanding emotions and thoughts. And this is kind of key because sometimes emotions and thoughts are very unconscious and people aren't quite aware of them. And so ways you can do this in your class is just having a check-in. Like I said, starting out your day with the check-in. This could be a part of your routine. You can use a feeling word wheel, which you can find these on Google Images. There's tons of them out there. Some of them have a lot of words. Some of them have less words. Obviously, you want to find something that will appeal to the level of student in your classroom. I've got a couple of examples shown here. One where it's just an emoji mood chart where you can just pose that question. It doesn't have to be complicated or get involved, but just how are you feeling today? Just checking in, whether it's an emoji or just this one on the bottom to the right there where they say, you know, I'm doing, how choosing one of the words that can go along with how they're feeling. Another thing you can do in helping your students understand emotions and thoughts is to do a classroom activity. If you're in person, would obviously be a lot easier to do, but you could do it online as well. And what I mean about this is just reflecting on those losses and challenges of the past year by doing something such as a collage or doing a video or sharing, doing some kind of a writing activity around it could even work well. So depending on the level of the students in your classroom, doing some kind of a reflection and a way to kind of acknowledge that this has been really rough these last couple of years, and just coming together and building community in that regard. And then another one I want to suggest is trying these essential coping skills cards, which I'm going to show you right now. So I located these essential coping skills cards actually on Amazon. Everybody loves Amazon, right? But I was looking for something that could be kind of practical you could use in your classroom. And I really like these because they're applicable for all ages. So many things out there are, you know, more related to younger kids. And so I thought this one was really great. So we actually have a couple sets of these at our Panda Office Lending Library if anybody wants to try them. But the other thing that is so great about them is they are really associated with the social emotional learning components. And each one of these suits actually applies to one of the social emotional learning components. So they have 4 out of the 5, I should say. But the heart is self-awareness, the diamond is self-management, social awareness is the club, or the spade, I'm sorry, and then relationship skills is the club. And so just to give you an example, I'm not sure how well you can see the cards there. I'm showing a sample of the ace. So each one of the components has a whole set of cards. So ace to king. And so it's something you could easily do, again, kind of as a opening, checking in emotionally with your students. You could do this in pair work. You could do it as a big group. You could do it online easily. But like the first one, I'll just read off of recognizing emotions, which is the self-awareness one. And that's where students make bases of 5 different feelings and have another person name them. So that's something each person could take a turn doing, or one person could do it in a pair while the other one guesses what the emotion is. So it's, again, kind of becoming aware of emotions and how we express them non-verbally oftentimes. And then there's a second part onto it, which all the cards have kind of 2 different parts. And the second part on this one is, why is it important for you and others to be able to name the emotions that you're feeling? And this is so applicable to any level of student that we have. So again, this is another idea that I want to throw out there. And if anyone's interested in piloting this or trying it in their class, please let me know and we'll send off one of the sets of cards for you. So let's move on to the second component, which is self-management. So how do you manage the emotions, thoughts, and behaviors? So the first one was understanding them, and now it's learning how to manage them. And this can always be a challenge of managing them, especially when you're triggered. So the first one is helping your students identify what stressors are in or out of their control by using a circle of control. And here I have an example of a circle of control where you can have the students do this as an exercise of where do they have most control, maybe some control, and then no control. So this is just another idea of things that you can do in your class. Another idea
I lost Wendy's audio. Did anyone else?
Yep, I did too.
Okay.
Yep, I did too.
Wendy, can you hear us?
She's kind of frozen too.
Yeah, no audio. It's happened like in the other session too. So I
Okay.
guess we have to wait.
Yeah, thanks everyone. Wendy, if you can hear us, my suggestion is first to turn off your video and see. Go ahead and speak. Let's see. We see you now.
Oops, I think
There we
I
go.
just disconnected. Did that happen?
It did. We hear you now though. So go ahead
You're
and
back.
reshare your slides and we're back at it. No worries.
All right, sorry about that, everyone. So
Well,
I
you
hope
know what? Tech happens. No worries.
I know, doesn't it? Wasn't that one of the triggers? Technology. All right, so I think, did everybody hear about the stop, think, options plan? I think it was cut out right about then. Is that
I
right?
think you're right. Yeah.
Okay, all right. The last strategy I'm going to share is what's called a song mood chart. And this is just kind of a fun, lighthearted thing you could do with students to help them identify certain emotions by connecting it to a song. Music just always is, actually music uses a part of your brain that nothing else does. And so I'm a real strong proponent for using music whenever you can. But this is just a chart of things you could do with your students. This is a simple one. You could make it more complex or even simpler. But, you know, like naming a song that inspires you to identify the feeling of being uplifted, or a song that reminds you of a good time for happy, or a song that makes you feel safe for calm, a song that makes you cry, you know, identifying sadness, or a song that makes you want to dance is joy. So you're welcome to use this as an idea. We're going to move on to the third component, which is social awareness, meaning understanding perspectives and having empathy for others. This is also obviously an important thing to emphasize with students. And so first thought would be to show a YouTube video about what empathy is and what it means. And I have an example here, which is on your handout. I'm not going to show it. It's about 5 minutes long. But if you have a minute or 5 minutes to look at it and see if it's something you would want to share with your students, but you can always try to find other videos that explain what empathy is. Another idea is to read some books about other cultures, backgrounds, and views, and then discuss those questions related to the reading. And so this is Edutopia. I'm going to quickly go into Edutopia. I'm sure a lot of you are familiar with this website, but this I thought was great because it had many diverse book choices and at all grade levels. So you can choose the grade level, and it gives a little instructions as well. So that's an idea for you. And then another one, this is a great website. I've been meaning to say this, but I got a lot of these great ideas and links from a webinar I attended by Patricia Irwin. She was fabulous. She's from the National Center for Families and Learning, and she graciously agreed to let me share a lot of her ideas. But this was another one that she shared in the webinar. And I think this is a great website. It's PBS, but it's Kentucky Virtual Art Museum, and art's another way of learning about emotions. And what's really neat about this, it has several different art samples of artwork, and you just click into one of them or any one of them, and it has background reading. Some of it's simple, some complex. Then they have activities, what you can do with the art material. There's student materials like discussion questions that you can use, and it's all related to social emotional learning. They really follow those components in throughout this website. So another resource for you. And again, these are all on your handout. And then the last one I wanted to mention, oops, sorry, I can't seem to get at that because of my screen here. But the last one is another one that I have shared before. Let me see here if I can get at it. For some reason, I cannot. All right, well, I'm not going to go to that, but you can check into it. It's from World Education, and it also has all kinds of art ideas that you can use in your classroom related to adults. So the fourth component we're going to be talking about is relationship skills. So establishing and maintaining healthy relationships. And some things you can do around this is using some listening circles to share. Again, this could be in person or online, where you could bring up certain questions, just posing a question such as, where would you travel if you could go anywhere? Or describe something that makes you happy, just making them light. It doesn't have to be heavy. It's just an opportunity to listen to other people and share different points of view. And then there's all kinds of games that you can use to build community. I'm going to give you a couple of ideas here. One is 2 truths and a lie. You may have heard of this before, and this could just be a pair or big group activity where each person tells 3 things about themselves, and 1 is a lie, and everybody has to guess what the lie is. So it's a way to get to know other people and make it kind of lighthearted. Another one is back-to-back drawing, and this is where one student would have a picture of something, let's say it's a flower, and they would instruct the other student on drawing what they're holding without telling them what it is. So it's just something kind of fun again and lighthearted, and something where they can get to know each other. And then lastly is using each person's name and using each letter in their name to say something about themselves. Like for instance, for my name, Wendy, W I would put Wicked, which is my favorite musical. E would be for enjoy, music and travel. N would be for nice, try to be nice most of the time. D would be for disability specialist. And Y would be for yellow, one of my favorite colors. So just a simple things that you can do. Let's move on to the 5th and the last component, which is responsible decision making. And this is helping students demonstrate problem solving and critical thinking. And again, this just really kind of goes along with CCRS. So some ideas around this is just providing some thought-provoking questions for either a discussion or a writing activity. Questions that are much more problem solving and critical thinking related, such as describe an event where you learned a lesson the hard way. Really, how did you get through that? How did you solve it? And students sharing this with each other. Or what are the values that guide your life? What's most important in your life? Things like that can really kind of promote discussion or making it a writing activity. Excuse me. Another one is doing some goal setting activities, and the important part is that they're short term and they're attainable. So you may have heard of SMART, the SMART goal, which is specific, measurable, achievable, and relevant. And then the last thought is to think about using choice boards. This is something I really promote in Universal Design for Learning training. It's an opportunity for students to make a choice on how they want to demonstrate their knowledge. And it's just giving them various opportunities and ideas and how they might go about doing that. All right, so let's see, how are we doing on time?
Well, Wendy, we only have about 5, maybe 8 minutes, no, 6 minutes or so. Do you want to go into breakouts briefly, or?
Sure. Let's go into
Okay.
the breakouts briefly. I just really want to give you an opportunity to chat with each other about what activities you might use out of each of the social emotional learning components. And then even maybe more importantly, discuss how you'll go about implementing them in your classroom. Is this something you're going to do at the beginning of the day? Is this something you're going to do in a full lesson, couple weeks of lessons? How might you go about doing that? So let's just get in the breakout room for a few minutes to especially talk about number 2, since we're limited on our time right now.
Sounds good. I've created the same rooms you were in before, so it'll save time with the introductions, and you'll have 4 minutes and then a 1-minute callback warning. So I'll create those now.
Great.
Go ahead and unmute though.
That's so funny because I wasn't muted when I left. Okay, sorry about that. I hope you had some good discussions around and shared some ideas, things that you're going to be trying in class, and how you're going to go about implementing them in your classroom. So I think we're out of time here, so I'm not going to ask people to share, but I do hope you enjoyed the session and learn some ideas that you can use right away in your classes. And thank you so much for joining me today.
Great, thank you, Wendy. So I've put the Zoom link for all the other sessions that you can use to rejoin your next session, and you have about 15 minutes. The next one begins at 11. See you there.
Okay, sounds good. Take care, everyone. Enjoy the rest of the conference.